joining us for another edition of the Sunflower Nation Women in Leadership podcast. I am Dr. Edith Banks, and I'm so excited to have with us again a dear friend, Dr. Sharmayne Jenkins. Sharmayne, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me back. I didn't think you would after I kept talking so much last time.
Well, that's the whole point of a podcast, is for us to talk. And it was so good. This is the first time I've ever done a two-part podcast. So
Okay,
that means you're special.
I mean, aren't I?
So last time we spoke a lot about your upbringing. We spoke about your parents, your daughter rather, and you leaving to travel, some of your educational experience. But ultimately, what I really want to go into is how you transitioned. You know, you were originally a hairstylist and you transitioned. So why don't you start right there and tell us about that move for you?
How I went from the doctor of hair to the doctor of education.
That's right.
So, you know, as I've hoped you've realized about me, there's never a straight path and everything is slightly convoluted. But what I will say is, and I talked about it a little bit last time, I believe, even when I was doing hair, I was still in school. I had a real urge to continue learning with no real direction. So in the course of, I say the first 10 years I was doing hair, I went to undergrad and then I went to graduate school, got my MBA in marketing.
Where did you go to graduate school?
Where?
Mm-hmm.
I went to Hofstra University.
And was that a good experience for you?
I mean, it was what it was. I was a grown person with responsibilities, as they say in the Rugrat movies. So I will tell you a few things, but you know, at that point I had a 6-year-old. Somewhere in there, the heaven sent babysitter I was talking about decided she was relocating to Florida. Me and my husband separated in the middle of that. And I was still doing hair full time, which, if you know, people know that's not a career you can pretend. A lot of people go to work, they pretending to work. Can't pretend to do hair. Right. So it was a juggle and I was going full time. What might have made it an unpleasant experience was what I deem, I make it up, I have no proof, as racism around some of the ways I was or wasn't supported in the program. So within the whole School of Business, there were 5 Black students. And this was large. We had classes in lecture halls of 200-300 people. And at times there might be 2 Black folks at best. And so when I first got into school, I don't come from a background. My mom had an associate, my father didn't graduate high school. My grandmother had a high school diploma. Like, I'm legit the first one to have made it past a 2-year degree. So, and that's even amongst my friends, right? Like, I don't think any of my closest friends at the time had college degrees. So I'm navigating this on my own. And when I went to be advised, I was told, you know, I explained to the woman, I work full time. I have this, my daughter was 4. I think I said 6. My daughter was 4 when I started, 6 when I graduated. You know, I have a 4-year-old, I have this full-time demanding career I have. And she recommended I take 18 credits.
Wow.
And see how that works for you. And amongst those credits was business law, accounting, finance. I think I had 2 or 3 different math classes, business law and marketing, and then 3 math classes in the middle. I did the finance, the business accounting, and something else I don't remember.
So if we put this all in perspective, though, what year was this?
This was my first semester.
No, but what year?
Oh, 19, right, trying to play me. It was 1992.
Okay, because now, you know, in education, we usually don't recommend taking more than 15 credits a semester, and you have to have a particular GPA to take 18 credits.
But
so things definitely have changed.
But here's the thing, let me stop you. I didn't really talk to anybody, but I started talking to this young white boy and young white man um, that was in class because we ended up having the same car. My car had gotten stolen. I was driving, my mother died with a brand new Toyota Corolla, and this kid had the same car. So I started telling him my whole story about my car getting stolen and why we had the same car, because you know I like to talk and talk to strangers. And so we established, you know, a relationship of sorts. He told me that the same person advised him, a 27-year-old living at home with no job, to only take 9 credits
Wow.
and to see how it felt. And if he was comfortable with that, they increased the credits the next semester. So that's why I felt like it was something at play there, because
Setting you up to fail.
setting me up to fail. And I had a full scholarship to graduate school that I didn't apply for. And about the second semester, so the same person said to me that in order to maintain and keep this scholarship, you have to work 20 hours a week for the school in order to keep it. And I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, I already told you what my life looks like. I don't have 20 hours to give y'all.
So it was the reason you were taking 18 credits was that was one of the requirements for the scholarship?
No, she suggested it. And I was like, okay. Because what did I know? Until I was going crazy and making up stories about myself. You're not set up for this, you're not equipped, blah, 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 blah,
The
blah.
imposter syndrome setting in.
And I was taking care of my grandparents, right? Let's add that in there. And so one of my mentors, you know, as I was fretting over this, I had 2 mentors that I talked to. One used to be the chair of the psychology department at my undergrad that really saw me through undergrad. And I was like, I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I can't work on this level. Blah, 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 blah. And he was like, Sharmayne, did you ever consider that if you didn't have so many responsibilities, you'd be doing better? Because I was like, I'm just a B student. I can never seem to get an A. And he was like, did you ever think if you didn't have all these responsibilities and other things that were demanding your time, that you might be an A student? Like, you might have better grades because you'd have better time. And that thing was really shifted me, right? It provided me a different perspective. Like, I did have a lot. I had this young kid. I had my grandparents. I had to work. You know, I had the marriage I was trying to figure out. I had a home to keep. I had stuff to do. I couldn't just dedicate. And then I was trying to, you know, work on this new level. So that was one thing. And then my other mentor, she was like, drop a class, Sharmayne. Like, you could drop a class. And I was like, that sounds like quitting to me. I don't quit. I overcome. I don't give in. I smile. You know, child, I dropped them class. I dropped 2 of those math classes. I dropped 2. I know it was finance. I don't know what else I dropped. It might have been, one was finance, I know. And I took that over, over the Christmas break intercession. I took it over intercession because, you know, it's only 3-4 weeks. I got to cut a bunch of stuff out, get to the meat. And then I did the other one over in summer school. But if they hadn't told me that, I would have definitely dropped out. And then she tried to take my scholarship from me, which theoretically would have been fine because I hadn't applied. I didn't know. I was prepared to pay for school. But I fought her on it. And, you know a little bit about me as a wordsmith and a fighter. And so, you know, I disputed it and they let me maintain it and told me I didn't have to work. So there was that. At that graduation, when I gave her that name card, I was like this.
Here you go. I'm here.
Right.
You may not have
So,
expected to
yeah.
see me, but I'm here.
And they said they'd never had 5 Black people in that program before at the same time. So a bunch of us were trying to decide like what the conversation was behind the scenes about that and who they were trying to like get drop out so they could maintain their normal quota around those things. But so that, if anything was trying, it was that. But because I had a life that I had to get to, I didn't care about the other stuff. I need to come to these classes. I need to get out of here and go get my kid and, you know, go work and do what I have to do and stay up all night and, you know, do what I needed to do for schoolwork. And then immediately after I graduated at May, I opened my salon that July. And
Wow.
and that same professor tried to tell me I didn't have my GPA wasn't satisfactory to graduate after. It was a thing. So I had to go and talk to a couple of professors, get them to change a grade here and there, make that A minus a A, make this or whatever. Somebody else gave me a book to read. Just read this book, Sharmayne, and I'll change your grade. Like, because they were like, she's being ridiculous. Like, even the professors was like, really? Don't worry about it. Don't you worry about it. So I opened my salon 2 months later.
So tell
Um,
me, what was that like as a new business owner? You know, you just graduated in May. In July, you opened a business. Did you have savings? Did you have to get a loan to start your business?
no. So I'm cheap, right?
More
And
power to the cheap ladies.
okay,
We're the ones with
and
savings.
yeah, even more frugal back in the day. Like my mom was like, nobody pinches a penny like you. And I had monies, like when my mom died, she left me some money. It wasn't big money, but it was more than I expected her to have. The job, life insurance. She had a little thing on the side and a little annuity. And I never really spent the money because I just felt like my mother didn't die for me to trick.
Mm-hmm.
And so, aside from what I'd amassed, I also had, and my mom's dead 30 something years, and I still have some of the money she left me.
Wow.
And I wanted to say it, stress again, it wasn't a lot. Um, but I would never like do that to her, you know? So I also, if you want the plot to thicken, I also closed on my house that month. So, so through the last few months of graduating, that's when the contractors were in there working on the salon and everything like that. So I always knew I wanted to be a salon owner. And a lot of people were like, it blew their minds that I went and got this MBA and still just wanted to do hair.
Mm-hmm.
But that was my passion. And it was where what I was supposed to do, I was clear on it. So, and I bought my grandparents' house because they were living in squalor. It was really bad. And their other 7 grandkids were like, you got to do something, Sharmayne. It's really bad. You got to
Did
do
it become
something.
you? Were you the oldest? Why was
No,
it you?
I'm the Negro with the money. Um, And so I guess they decided if she can live like this, then she should be the one financing everything for everybody else. We like to come over here and visit, but they need stuff and you should be the one to do it. So I
Mm.
bought the house. Um, and I reconstructed the house, all 4 floors. It was a 2-family. I wanted to get a house anywhere. If you remember, I was telling you I was buying a house when my mom started.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just didn't want to do it anymore. And now me and my ex-husband, the husband, we had separated. And so I didn't feel like I could buy a house for me and a house for them. And they still needed somebody to be there with them and support them. So I bought their house. It was 2-family. I did the whole house over and then I moved in with Chris. So I closed in that July. And then I spent 4 months working on the house and I opened my salon that July.
Wow.
So it was quite a year, excuse me.
I would imagine that's quite stressful.
It was super stressful and I felt hella broke too. But I put
No,
out the,
that's a real thing, especially when you're somebody who's used to having money saved in an account and you have to keep touching it and, it goes down and down and down. It's like, oh, my comfort level is no
what feels
longer there. My cushion is not there anymore.
right. You know what feels comfortable for you.
Right.
And you out here, bah, 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 right? And even or change is stressful, even when it's change you like, right? It just requires so much of you in terms
Mm-hmm.
of how you show up in life, how you think, different considerations you have, right? You can't live the same. I always tell people like you can't be married and act single. You can't have a kid and act like you don't have children. You can't open a business and act like you're still an employee. You can't be a homeowner and still act like a renter. So there was a lot of change occurring for me. At the same time, that I wasn't quite clear how to navigate. And, I always go back to, and I didn't have my mother to help support me in it, or just let me, lay on her shoulder and
Mm-hmm.
cry, or, whatever. So it was a lot. And it was all things I wanted, except I didn't really want to live with my grandparents, even though they were downstairs and I was upstairs, but that was
Close
my
for
mother's
comfort.
mother. It was my mother's mother. I didn't like my grandmother. She didn't like me, right?
Hmm.
But that's my mother's mother. I
What
wasn't
makes you
gonna,
feel like she didn't like you?
because she didn't like me.
Why? What's there not to like?
Let me tell you something. Thank you, sweetie. You're a dear heart. But what I know about myself is it's generally not gray area. People either love me or they don't like me. It's one or the other. There's and a lot of people might come over to the other side once they get to know me, but I'm a handful. I have a strong personality. I have a lot of things. And it doesn't work for everybody. And nobody works for everybody. Grandmother, we just didn't get along like it is with many people. And I didn't like her. I felt like she was nosy, intrusive. She had left my mother in New Hampshire. My family's from New Hampshire. She had left my mother in New Hampshire when she was little in a group home so she could come, as I defined it back then, to frolic in New York City and find herself a
Mm,
man. My mother contracted polio while she was in the group home. She didn't have my mother at her wedding. It was a bunch of
mm,
stuff. So I just really wasn't checking for her. And she was just nosy in my bed. I didn't like her. She didn't like me, but that was my mother's mother. And now my mother's not here. I'm not gonna not take care of her.
right.
Right. So, buying the house, it just bought a bunch of other stuff because it is whatever. So anyway, so I had my salon for about 10 years. And in that time, I started feeling this pull to get a doctorate. But the pull was more for personal edification. Like I feel like I spent a lot of time um, combating the concept that people had of what hairstylists are. Right.
Mm,
There's a lot of caricatures about hairstylists.
right.
And I'm clear that the undergrad and the graduate degree were largely for me to prove to myself that that's not who I was and that wasn't why I was doing hair.
Mm, mm-hmm.
And it was also to prove to others, because when people started with that stuff, I'd be like, I had an MBA. I don't know what you're talking about. Right.
Good. Good for you.
And I mean, good for me and not good for me, because what I've learned is, like it's such a futile attempt to try to make people see you as valuable. Right. And so no matter what you acquire or how you try to show up for people, like it's just a really bad use of good energy to be trying to run around and worry about other people finding you worthy and valuable. So, but I realized I was doing that really for personal edification at some point. And I was like, how far are you going to go to prove you're valuable, Sharmayne, and you have worth? Like, this is ridiculous. So I let go of that after a while. And I was like, I'm not doing this. This is not what it's for. And so, I my doing hair had excelled. I started working in TV, movies, print ads. Um, I got 3 magazine covers. Um, a lot was happening for me with that more aligned to, it was more than I could ever think for. I was supposed to be a salon. I never even knew that existed or could exist for me working outside of a
Mm,
salon. Um, and so a lot of things started opening up for me and people started bringing me into things. And so it broadened my scope, it broadened my vision, and it made me see that other things were available. And it became really metaphoric for a lot of other areas in my life, what was possible. So the
Can you give me an
doctor,
example? Like,
um,
how do you feel overall your life was
so I
affected?
think that my vision for myself at best was maybe to have a few salons. Um, I never considered, sometimes I think everybody has this, so, but you think you see certain things and you go, that's for them, that's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
got to be
Mhm.
a certain kind of person for that to be a thing
Right.
for your to occur in your life, for you to have access to. And I think it made me realize that maybe I was making up a lot of stories in lots of other areas of my life about what opportunities and spaces and experiences were possible for me that I deserved to be able to
Mm.
experience or have access to, and
Were there Go ahead.
also what skills were required to be in those spaces. Like I'm not good enough skill wise to be in those spaces.
Were there any times that you felt like, well, you spoke about your counselor, but outside of that, were there any times where you felt like you were being held back and couldn't make it to the level that you wanted to because there were kind of like these barriers in the way because you were a woman of color?
To say no only because I created a world where I didn't have to um I didn't have those barriers to breach. Like because of experiences young, I think I mentioned, being born into segregation and
Mm-hmm.
having a deep, I created a world that allowed me to not have to encounter certain things.
Mm.
I was weary at a very young age. So even by high school, I went to school in Bayside, New York, which was largely white. Now it's white Asian population more so, but it's still, my daughter went to school in that district. I sent her there. It still was the same issues. I was weary by high school, so I decided not to go to the high school I would have fed into and
Mm.
applied to another high school that was in South Jamaica, Queens, but it was like a gifted high school just to get myself in Black spaces. And from doing hair, I intentionally kept myself in Black spaces. Like I
Mm.
just didn't want to deal with a lot of that. So I didn't deal with any of that until I started teaching undergraduate as an adjunct. And then I got inserted back into largely white space, even though the school was largely minority. And that's where I probably felt, a lot of the resistance to my existence.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want a career in higher ed, so I didn't even care then half the time. Like, you can hate me now, but you can't stop now. Like, I posted about some of my experiences in white spaces. So, two experiences, teaching and my training and development to become a life coach were largely white spaces. And both of them equally as bad because they're both spaces where people are supposed to be liberals and open-minded and believe in, the opportunities for all and the expansion and elevation of all. And the white folks in them are generally the white, especially in coaching, who feel like they're liberal and they think and they minded and
No.
they got all of this stuff. And I would always be the only Black person in the space. I had a couple of exceptions, not feeling safe in these spaces. And on the thread, people from both the spaces responded. And one was my former chair who knew, and I didn't mention where it was, but I talked about the context.
Mm-hmm.
And my old chair hit me on the side and was like, seems like maybe we need to talk. And I hadn't taught for 2 years. I had a car. I wasn't going to be there anyway because of stuff they were doing, but I had a car accident and that
Oh
just
no.
ensured that I couldn't go back, which was God. And
Always is. Always is.
yeah, it really was. It freed me from wanting to go back, even if, while things were really crazy and bleak.
Mm-hmm.
It got to a point I wouldn't even go in the office. My mentor, who was my executive mentor during my program, and she's white, she was like my safe space. And when she became the dean of the school of arts and sciences, it took her out of the department. And that's when like I lost my safety shield. So like I would
Mm.
literally the last 5 or 6 years, I would go downstairs and sit in her office.
Wow.
I would never go upstairs, or I would go to another person's office and sit with them. I didn't want to be in there because they
So
were
when you
just
say
so,
they took her out the department where
because she
she was
became the
full
dean.
time? Okay,
She became
okay,
the dean of the School of Arts and Sciences. So that took
okay.
her out of the department. You know, she's over there on the executive side. So I
And
didn't
I,
have anybody there. She was the chair before. So
mm-hmm,
at least I had her, and she tempered everybody else, right? But
mm,
with her gone, it was the Wild Wild West. And when I talked to the dean about the treatment later, because she said she wanted to talk, and I went to my mentor, she was like, that's interesting.
what you
Because
mean? Hmm, that's interesting.
she knew what kind of person she was.
Okay.
And she's like, well, let's see. When I went to talk to her, she really didn't want to hear what I had to say. She was trying to defend herself and come back. You know, I was, talking about what
Mm,
a hostile environment I felt like it was. And my last 6 years or so, I taught Black psychology. And at one point, she was like, I think I'm, looking to get rid of. Well, first of all, she told me the only reason she still had me there was because I was the only person that could teach that course. So then she said she was thinking about changing it from Black psych to multicultural psychology. I said, that's what regular psych is. I said, there's a
right.
reason that Black psychology was created in the 60s, because the Black experience in America is the uniquest experience of anybody in this country. And it has created unique psychological issues for us, past and present. And so it has to be looked at difference. Plus, Western psychology worked very hard initially with no evidence or foundation to come up with
Mm,
theory to make us inferior and to justify the treatments of us. So we had to have a counter to it, looking at some like solid things. I had the conversation and I was talking about, this one wouldn't even talk to me, would look dead in my
mm.
face and not speak, and you knew it. Well, why? What could I do about that? I said, you're the chair of the department.
You'll
How do
figure
you
it out. That's
allow
why they pay
somebody
you what they pay you.
to not speak to another faculty member in the department? I mean, literally, she go, hi, Edith, hi, so-and-so, say the names to make sure I knew she didn't say hi to me. It wasn't gonna be no general hi. And you know me, I'm gonna go in her office, hey, Dr. So-and-so, love your sweater. So my mentor wasn't surprised, right? The school I taught at was largely minority, largely below the poverty line, largely immigrant, largely figuring out how to navigate this world by themselves, having to figure out who they were in the midst of stereotypes and all kinds of constructs
Mm-hmm.
around who they were, and oftentimes being forced to come to college because of their parents' dream and not.
Right.
And I needed them to know who they were. And a lot of these kids are going through a lot of stuff.
So
And
I would wonder, when I look at the school system as part of the Board of Education, when the kids transition from PK and kindergarten to grade 1, if they're struggling, they say, oh, it's the kindergarten didn't do what they were supposed to do. When they transfer from, lower division to middle school, they say, oh, the lower school didn't do what they were supposed to do, or the middle school didn't do what they were supposed to do to prepare them for high school. How do you feel about that as an educator, but someone who's passionate about, self-discovery and exploration? How do you respond to that?
So I had practical responses. I made sure my classes required a lot of writing, and writing in the way that they couldn't plagiarize, and that incorporated a lot of self-discovery. So when I first
Mhm.
started teaching, I'm asking all the sages supposedly for advice. And one of them told me, don't worry about the grammar and structure of what they write.
Wow.
Just look to see if they have the concepts right. And my response was, where they do that at? Like, because I'm sure, and this was a white person, I'm sure, and this, I said, this is what's in this department. People who have decided that this isn't even mediocrity, that you're going to
Mm-hmm.
accept this. And so you said that this is all these children are going to be able to produce, and that's the line I should toe. And I questioned that, like, really, this is the straight, well, blah, blah. And I was like, it'll never be me. If these kids can't write, which many of them couldn't, I, they, I'm going to do what I can to support them.
As a mom, you have your daughter with you growing up, and you have a new business. You're out of school. Well, business not so new anymore, but you have your salon. You're out of school. You're teaching. How does all of that work? How do you balance all of that and still have relationships? Did you have relationships?
So there's always somebody around because but so for a long time I chose not to be in relationships with my daughter because I say this, it is what it is. Sometimes I feel bad about talking about my husband in these public circles, but he didn't do a really good job of parenting when he got married. And that's
Mm,
largely because of the person he chose. You know,
she
it
wouldn't
just
allow him to come and see his daughter.
I'll talk about him more than I'll talk about her. But let's just say it didn't create an atmosphere for my daughter that really supported her relationship with her dad.
Got it.
And so my ex-husband pretty much will allow you to take control of environments. I talked about that. And so it went with that too. And so for my daughter, it became a thing that you could tell she was worried when I was interested in somebody that would mean that I was going to end up doing what her father did because it shifted
Um,
their relationship. And so when I realized that, and it came out, one thing about having a salon, and I kept her in there much to her chagrin. Now she realizes that she learned a lot of stuff about how to be a responsible adult and how to deal with people being in there. But back then, she wanted a normal life,
mhm,
and she didn't have
mhm.
a normal life. And so, in talking with one, of my clients, it kind of came out that she was worried about if I got somebody, where her space would be. So I chose not to date, because
Mm.
I it wasn't that big a deal at some point. And as my life with the Lord became more consecrated, I didn't even know navigate things well because I was celibate for 13 years. So I had to figure out how to date and be celibate anyway. So it wasn't even that big a deal to me. I had a lot of stuff to take on.
Was being celibate a choice that you made, or
It
just
was a
happened to
choice. It
work
was
out
a
that way?
choice to try to be a
Intentional.
good
Okay.
consecrated Christian, give my
Amen.
life and my body fully over to the Lord, and all of that, which I
So
did for like,
what year are we on of
I
celibacy?
was about 33.
No, 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 right now.
What year were we on?
What year are we on of your celibacy?
Oh no, that ended. That ended when I was 47.
Wow, okay. You held that for a good long time.
Yep, from
And then
43
at
to
what age, how old was your daughter at that point?
when I was 47,
Hmm.
she was 20. I'm 25 years older than her, so she was 22, 23.
Okay. And so was she still in the house at that time, or had she moved out?
She was for play. When she went away to college, she never really came home. She stayed when she did the internship in New York for about 7 months. She was here, but she never really moved back home after college. And at that point, she was still in undergrad. Matter of fact, when I started dating the person who I gave my virginity to, my new resurrected
You
virginity
found
to. And who, I really thought I was going to be with for forever. And we had a really, really good long run when I decided, to fall off. But, on that too, I will say this, off topic, on topic. what I realized about my celibacy at some point was that I wasn't doing it for my relationship with God. I was using it as a way to avoid intimacy in relationships. It
Mm.
became like a really like a wall and a shield for me. So it wasn't
How did you heal though to make you feel safe enough to want to share yourself with someone in that way?
healing to me isn't something that occurs. It's not a event. So healing to me is a progressive thing.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and I don't feel like with what you're talking about, I don't think that occurs and then you move into. I think you move into and then you heal. Right. I
Mm.
think I believe all growth occurs in relationships. So the person that you want to be, I don't care if it's emotionally, intellectually, relationally, I don't care what it is. It can't help it in isolation. We all think we figure some stuff out, or we've all
Mhm.
decided we can't figure some stuff out when we're by ourselves. And then you get in a relationship, and I'm not just talking romantic. I don't care if it's a professional, friends, or whatever. When you're in those relationships is when you find out who you are.
Right. Right.
And that's where you get the exercise in of doing. I'm a loving person. I'm like, when somebody does something to you, I'm patient and kind. You did First Corinthians yourself to death, and then you get out here, and soon as something happens, you got a crazy old attitude. So we have to practice things. You have to learn you have to practice patience. You have to practice kindness. You have to practice love.
Mm.
You have to practice standing up for yourself. You have to practice boldness. You have to practice restraint. All of these things happen in relationship. And and from a place of abundance, when I talk scarcity and abundance, I've learned that there's underpinnings to scarcity of there's not enough, which ultimately leads to I'm not enough. And with abundance, there is enough. I am enough. And part of being enough
Mm.
is knowing that you can go through something and still be able to come out of it and be okay.
Right.
Even if you're hurt, you're broken, you've been wrong. I'm enough that I can withstand this thing happening to me and still be okay and be enough. And so it wasn't about healing to be able to be in this relationship with this different kind of intimacy. It was about me trusting that I would be okay if it didn't work out.
How did you get there though? Because I feel like a lot of women really struggle with trying to build that self-confidence which is what to me you're describing. It's just this belief in yourself that you are enough, that you are worth, you're worth the trouble, if you want to call it that, worth the hassle, of, waiting and learning someone's triggers and, just being with someone in relationship. Women struggle with that, understanding that they are worth the wait, they're worth, everything. How did you develop that strong self confidence?
I don't know that it was a self-confidence initially. It was just that I really wanted to live my life in a certain way. And I've always been a very principled person, right? That doesn't mean my life has always reflected it.
Listen, we're all human.
Right. But sometimes, even when you say you're a Christian, people, I thought you was supposed to that. And my life isn't always reflective, but there's always something for me to counter and to measure myself against. And there's always my personal convictions when I fall short. So at that point, initially I was just so strong and really trying to live a life that was pleasing to God. It didn't even matter. Like I was a turn off to people who didn't want to live it anyway. My friends used to call me baby Jesus. Like, so even it made some of my friends not want to be around me. I'm like, why didn't you invite? We was gonna be drinking and we was gonna be smoking, and we know you don't like that kind of stuff. And I was like, but I don't care. Like I've always been the kind of person hate to sin, not the sinner. And I never tried to make anybody not do anything. I just tried to live a certain way. and maybe they would see that there might be a benefit in making some of the choices I was making, but I never was like,
You did it. Yeah,
you
yeah.
sirs.
And it's
But
hard to be friends or be around someone who's a new Christian because it's exactly what you just said. Oh no, I don't do that. I live my
I
life
never
for the
said that. But
Lord.
I never
And
smoked. I never really was a drinker or a smoker, none of that anyway. But it was this new thing about me. So it was their problem, not mine. Because I could be sitting there chilling, but they over there, I know she judging me. She probably
mhm,
saying it. That's the things people have in their head. So, but also when you show up differently in your life, it's going to make certain people not want to be around you, if only they're measuring themselves against you, or it makes them uncomfortable, or they just want to be around people that do other things. Like even when I started, having my little cocktails I might have now, it was because the man I was dating, Mr. Man, would be like, "You're not gonna have a drink with me with dinner." We go out a lot, and he was like, and I was like, I don't, give me my ginger ale or whatever. Come on, try. And he'd give me some little fruity something. I was like, oh, this is cute, right? But most people that I was around, like, I don't like to get high and then when the person around me isn't. You know what I mean?
mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
there are people that are as you excel or ascend or shift or whatever you do, there are people that are going to weed themselves out of your
Oh
life
yeah.
because they're not comfortable being around somebody who's not partaking in what they're partaking in, if only because it makes them check themselves about what they're doing.
Right.
So just like there was some people in my life that were my friends that no longer wanted to be around me, there was certain kind of men that weren't going to talk to me. And then
Right.
there was the flip side, the men that figured they was so Barney bad behind and they was going to be the one to get me to fall off or whatever. And they'd make all their efforts and they'd be like, yo, you really not going
You
to,
for real about this thing?
you know? And even one of the guys that's still in my life, he would ask me silly questions. Like he almost could have laughed me out of my panties at that point. He was so funny. He would ask questions like, so since you're not having sex, you still take care of that area down there?
That's a real question, though.
And he was
I'm
like,
not gonna ask it on here, though.
I don't care. I'm like, God naturally groomed me, so I
Oh
never really
Lord.
had to do a lot of stuff. He knew I'm low maintenance chick. But a lot of guys were surprised that they stayed in relationship with me, even with no sex from
Mm,
me. And I want to say that I never told anybody they couldn't have sex with anybody else because my thing was, I'm not trying to force you into my lifestyle choices, and don't try to force me into yours. So if you out here doing whatever you're doing, I can't tell you not to live however you want. However, when you come over here, there are certain things that I'm not going to engage, and that's
right.
up to you. And people, women, men were really surprised at my big age that men were still willing to be in relationship with me without having sex.
About yourself now, how do you assess yourself? Where do you see yourself?
I am floating in an abyss between two worlds. I am, that relationship lasted on and off for 13 years. Um, we made it, it was a decision that it was time for it to be over. Um, as far as career wise, I had transcended fully from hair into my coaching and leadership, but I let a lot of that, well, two things happened. I put a lot on pause trying to work my way through this degree, one, and then I shifted my attentions, started aligning more with where I am now. So where I used to do a lot more around soft skills, a lot of my work has become around cultural competency
Mm,
and bias and stuff like that. And so trying to redefine myself concretely around those things, requires some work of me while I still want to get back into my personal development stuff. So I've been really sitting with um, deciding if I have to choose, right? Because a lot of people make you feel like you have to choose one or the other. If I
mm-hmm.
don't want to choose, what does that look like for me? And I think I'm not going to choose,
Good for you.
right? So because the personal coaching is really important to me. And then my human resource management aspect of my career is really important for the world.
Mm,
Um, because a lot of folks are suffering because people are unwilling to
right.
deal with what's going on or don't have the tools or the capacity and understanding about it. So I get to do, from somebody who did hair and taught psych, I don't know why I felt like I had to choose, but so I get to not choose. So I'm working with what's in my hands. I've done, a bunch of TV, bunch of podcasts, a bunch of everything. All of that's getting transcribed. One thing I learned about when we were in school is that daggone rev.com, honey. I am
Rev.com, this is an advertisement opportunity.
okay. When I tell you that's what I've been going through is talk about being an infopreneur. You look at your same information and the different ways that you can distribute and use the same information. So, it also affords me with my writing that I'll have all of the stuff already typed, right? And I could just pull topics and do
Be
whatever
ready.
editing
Right.
or
Right.
whatever, but I'm not constantly like trying to,
Recreating everything. Yeah.
yeah.
I
So
agree. But what is next for you? Right? Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? What would you like to be doing?
no idea. And
That's
that's,
okay.
yeah, that's kind of how I've lived my life. There's not a thing that's happened to me or for me past doing hair that I would have ever anticipated. And if I'd have thought about it, I probably would have talked myself out of it. I would have never been a coach. I would have never got a master's. Probably would have opened a hair salon at some point because that's the only thing I knew I was going to do. I would have never worked with some of the biggest stars in Hollywood. I would have never taught psychology. I would have never gotten a doctorate. I would have never started any of the courses. I would have never had the impact I had if I planned it out. I
It's
re-
interesting. One of the things that I say all the time is if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that's not always the case. I look
no,
at you and I see a very successful woman in her own right. You live life by your own terms, and you have such a great impact on people. I can share personally that you have had a great impact on my life. In times of struggle, you have really lifted my spirit. And I'm sure you didn't plan those things. I think you are just living life, in my opinion, you are living life one day at a time, but you're making each day purposeful and impactful. And I think that's a beautiful thing to be able to do.
thank you for that. I do kind of live one day at a time, but I also am intentional when I realize, what I'm supposed to do in that moment. Like I know I'm put on this earth to be a disruptor. I'm here to disrupt patterns. I'm here to disrupt paradigms. I am here to support people in their growth. And sometimes I realize, like an Olympic coach, that there are a lot of people that I'm going to set up to do way more than I'll ever do. I am a stepping stone for folk.
Mm,
I'm an Apollo log. I used to I used to say
rub that
I dated
love.
so many people that went on to be like these guys that went on to be huge celebrities. I was like, I'm still sitting here like the Apollo log. They rub on me and then they go on to infamy and the log still sitting there in the Apollo, but attributed for many people at least feeling like in that moment they had luck and were prepared them to go out
They could
onto
do
this
it. Right.
to this next stage. And I think that a lot of what I'm here for is that. My goals for myself at this point is to have the greatest reach, the greatest touch I can, coupled with, making the greatest dollar. That's in there too. Your gift will make room for you in the kingdom. Your gift will
Mm,
always, and the kingdom is a marketplace as well. And so, I have real high hopes of stuff that I do that way. And that's an example too, right? That's a legacy.
Mhm.
Um, Somebody wrote under one of my pictures talking about doing, attaining this degree. They said from hair to here.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, and there's a lot of people, even in my industry, that just don't know how to get out. And there's a lot of people in a lot of service industries that don't know how to get out. And I
Right.
realized that I'm an example for people in those industries that you could get out and do something viable and excel and start a new life. I know I'm an example for women over 50. I left that career at 50. I started school at 56, 57 for this. I was 30 when I got my master's. I got my master's in 94, right? There's a lot of things I do. You know, my friends call me the artist of reinvention, right? Like they're like, Sharmayne, you always reinventing yourself. And
That's your
I'm a
gift.
Scorpio, so maybe that has something to do with it because the Phoenix is our sign.
Mhm.
Um, but I really want to be an example to people of what's possible. I try to represent possibility, and I try to provide that for people in whatever way I can. So for me right now, it's working with what's in my hands. And because I have access to a community many don't, I intend to leverage it to get me greater reach so that I can impact more people. But now, now's my season to say, like, this is what I'm doing.
Right.
Are you willing to support me this way? They say yes, they say yeah. I'm not attached to the outcome, you know, and I think that's something that Black women, particularly a lot of times, do not do, is leverage our relationships. Meanwhile, we've been everything to everybody else, but we won't allow people to pour into our lives. And I had an old lady client years ago. She came to get her hair done at my salon. I was too busy. I had one of my assistants do her hair, and she still wanted to tip me. And I wouldn't take her money. She was older, fixed income, this and that. And I was like, I'm not going to take your money, Miss Banks. And she said, don't you block my blessing.
Mm.
You're not going to block my blessing. I always get back. The Lord always rewards me handsomely for what I do, and you're not going to block it. Kind of shifted my perspective. A lot of times I don't let people help me for whatever I have attached to it. I could be blocking their blessing. God gives to those who give. Like it's a cycle.
Right.
He wants to bless you so you could be a blessing. And so sometimes I had to realize when I don't let people help me, I'm actually clogging up the pipeline, right?
Charmaine, give me your last piece of advice that you would give to women coming up.
My thing is really you're enough. And you're enough even when there's no evidence to suggest you're enough. And if you're out here looking for evidence to tell you you're enough, you'll never have enough evidence. And so you just have to know that just purely because you exist, that means you're enough. And
Mm.
whatever you're being drawn to is probably what you're supposed to do. And however you do it is probably the way you're supposed to do it, even if it's not conventional. God created me the way I was so that I could let the other people like me know that there was a place for them in the sanctuary, in the marketplace, in any space. So you we are all uniquely, fearfully, and wonderfully made
Mm.
for such a time as this. And so if God has inserted you in a space that feels hostile, if God has inserted you in a space that feels like they do not appreciate you or deserve you or honor who you are, it might even be abusive. What I've learned is everything is either God sent or God used. It's
Mm.
all an opportunity for your becoming. And the thing that I say to myself when I get in situations that are particularly challenging is that this is the preparation for a moment that matters. Most of the time, the people that are doing stuff to us and the things that are happening to us, if we can learn who we get to be in those situations to have it turn out, when the big thing comes and that's the obstacle in between, been there, did that. You already had the practice in who you needed to be able to successfully navigate that. Because it's never about the other person, it's always about you and how you get to respond. So my last thing would be my favorite equation I use, and I teach it everywhere, is E plus R equals O. Event plus response equals outcome. And so the event very rarely is going to change. The event is the event. If you're looking to have a desired outcome, the only thing that we have the opportunity to change is how we respond to the event. And so if you're not getting the outcome you want from things, then you got to figure out how to respond to it to get the outcome. And you keep trying until you get the desired outcome. And then you know how to move forward when that kind of event shows up again.
I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins.
You're more than welcome, Dr. Banks.
Giving us lots of pearls, lots of wisdom, and I truly do appreciate it. I know our listeners are going to gain so much from hearing from you. I always do. Every time we talk, I walk away feeling like, that's Sharmayne. That's Sharmayne. She knows exactly what to say and when to say it. So I definitely appreciate you. And thank you for joining us again. May your hearts be filled with the brightest of sunflowers, even on the cloudiest of days. Wishing you love and positive vibes. Until next time.